The Atelier series has been around for a long time, since 1997 in fact, and believe it or not, it has 22 mainline games to its name. And now here we are at number 23, Atelier Sophie 2, The Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream. This is of course a direct sequel to the original Atelier Sophie game which released in 2016. In that original game, the protagonist Sophie Neuenmuller learns to become a powerful and reliable alchemist, but here in the sequel, she's already there. She knows what she's doing, she's more confident in her abilities, and she wastes no time diving right into things, just like we're about to do right now. Atelier Sophie 2 picks up a good few years after the conclusion of the original game. Sophie and her friend Plushta, who used to be a book by the way, seriously it's a thing, go look it up, discover a large magical tree. This tree happens to be identical to one that Plushta saw in her dreams, and as they approach, without warning a powerful vortex pulls them into another world. Sophie wakes up alone and confused in this strange land known as Erdweich. Soon afterwards, she meets a couple of friendly faces who tell Sophie about a famous alchemist named Plushta who lives on the edge of town. Sophie eagerly makes her way to the atelier to reunite with her friend, but when she arrives, she discovers that Plushta doesn't recognize her at all. And this is where the story begins, and as usual, I'll leave it there to avoid spoilers. Anyone who's familiar with the Atelier series should have a good idea of what to expect, but for anyone that's new to the series, you've basically got three main blocks of gameplay: the gathering, the alchemy, and the battling. The long-running theme of the Atelier series is the alchemical crafting system, and in order to use this system, you need to gather ingredients. As you explore the various landscapes and locales of the game world, you'll have ample opportunity to gather and forage a huge amount of ingredients. You can gather water from rivers, pick flowers and mushrooms, mine ore, rocks and gems, and of course, take prizes from the monsters you slay in battle. It's really important to note that materials you gather don't generally stack in your inventory. If you pick up, let's say, 20 red flowers for example, you'll then have 20 individual red flowers sitting there in your inventory menu. The reason for this is that each and every single item you collect, no matter how small, has a variety of factors tied to it. They each have a level, a letter grade, a quality rating, an elemental type, effects, and traits. This makes it virtually impossible to stack multiples of the same item, but you do have 9,999 slots in your materials chest, which is located at the Atelier. While exploring the world, you don't actually have access to the material chest. You instead carry a basket. It's got far less space and can only be emptied by returning to the Atelier building itself. This may sound a little bit annoying at first, but don't worry, you can fast travel from basically anywhere to the Atelier and then back again in mere seconds. The only thing to keep in mind is that you will need to unlock these fast travel crystals dotted around the world map in order to do that. Occasionally you'll find some glowing gathering spots and some materials that you simply can't acquire. Certain items require you to craft and equip specific tools in order to collect them. The glowing gathering spots, on the other hand, are a bit more rare and require both the specific tool for the job and participation in a quick minigame. The minigame simply asks you to stop a spinning wheel to get better quality items, more of the item, or perhaps some extra money. There's also the addition of the Dreamscape stones that have the power to change the weather and to create new areas to explore. Changing the weather will literally change the environment around you in many areas of the game. For example, you may find an area that's been completely flooded with water. Simply locate a Dreamscape altar, insert the correct item, and change the weather to a bright and sunny day to lower the water level. You might find the correct way to proceed, or perhaps even a secret area that was completely inaccessible before. And now that you've roamed around the world and collected hundreds of ingredients, what do you do with them? Well, you use alchemy to change them into a vast array of useful items. Inside the Atelier building itself, you'll see a large bubbling cauldron, and this is where the alchemy takes place. The first thing you'll want to do is select an item you want to create from the recipes list. Some of these recipes are gated by the story progression, but some of them can be discovered while you're out and about foraging for materials. When you collect an item, Sophie may get an idea for a recipe. When this happens, a small light bulb will appear above her head and she'll write something down in her book. Later on, when you return to the Atelier, a little menu will pop up letting you know that you've actually learnt the recipe. After selecting the items you want to make, you'll be asked to select which ingredients you want to use to make it from a variety of categories. This is where the quality and the special effects of each individual item comes into play. When you want to make the absolute best version of an item, you'll want to select the highest quality ingredients that you currently have available, as well as the most beneficial effects. Once you've made your selection, you'll move to the synthesis panel. At first, this may look incredibly confusing, but trust me, you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. Each of the items you add will give you one of these color-coded elemental layouts that you can see on the left. The idea is that you want to add these to the synthesis panel strategically, linking up as many as you can of the same element and creating full horizontal and vertical lines. Each one of these can be rotated as need be, and you can go on ahead without using every single one if you want or need to. There's even an autofill option for players who don't want to mess around with this system too much and just want to enjoy the story and the battles. Speaking of the battles, this game features a more traditional turn-based battle system. If you join the series with Atelier Ryza, then it is worth noting that this game doesn't have any real-time elements to its combat, unlike both Ryza games. In Atelier Ryza, if you didn't do anything, combat would simply go on without you. However, in Atelier Sophie 2, this is not the case. If you don't do anything, nothing will happen. You initially start with a small group of characters, but you'll meet more throughout your adventure, and you can arrange them into two teams, the assault team and the backup team. During battle, you can use some special attacks that actually switch from backup to assault and vice versa. This is called a twin skill, and when you perform one, it allows both of the switching characters to use a skill and decrease its cost by 10, so it is well worth using. Each character has the basic attacks you would expect to see, they'll all learn skills as they level up, and they have multiple accessory slots for things like armor, weapons, trinkets, and consumable items. There's never a shortage of monsters to fight, as they can be seen all over the exploration areas. You can simply walk into them to initiate a battle, or swing your weapon at them beforehand. If you connect, you'll enter that battle with a slight advantage. Also, in a first for the series, there's absolutely no loading screens between the overworld and the battle screen. It's all seamlessly integrated for an overall smoother gameplay experience. Lastly, I just wanted to mention a few minor things before we move on. The first is requests. These are simply side quests that you can accept, complete, and turn in for extra rewards and money. Usually the completion requirements are pretty simple things like defeat X number of these monsters or gather X number of a certain ingredient. This is all taken care of at the Crystal Sparkle Pavilion, and it's also a fast travel location to make things a bit easier for the player. Koei Tecmo has also said that this game features enhanced 3D character models with the highest quality designs to date, and that's a good thing because there's also a photo mode that I'm sure some talented people will make great use of. And so this is where I get to share my personal opinion on the game, and firstly, I want to be completely upfront with you so that you know where my viewpoint comes from. My very first Atelier game, the first one I ever played, was Atelier Sophie back in 2016, and while that wasn't that long ago, it was where I discovered this series. I played a lot of that game, maybe 50, 60, possibly even 70 hours, but I never actually finished the story, and frankly, I regret that. I really wish I had have, but you know how it is, things come up and you end up falling off of a game. I think we've all been there. But the reason I bring it up is because, well, you could argue that I have some positive bias due to my history with Atelier Sophie specifically, so I wanted to let you know. And so with that in mind, surprise, surprise, I genuinely enjoyed my time with this game. The best way I can think to describe it is this game is more of everything that I loved about the original, with some tweaks, updates, and upgrades. Most of the time it looks absolutely gorgeous, and I feel like the art direction is very strong. I mean, it doesn't have the best graphics from a technical and power standpoint, it's not got the highest resolution textures and the characters aren't photorealistic. However, it is very vibrant, bright, and alive. It just looks like an anime that's come to life, and for me personally, I enjoyed just roaming around the environments and looking at everything, especially in the town. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. I have to be fair and point out that some assets in the game can look downright ugly. In some areas, you can see the seams of where two textures have joined up, and some of the textures are very low res indeed. The thing is though, if you look directly up from that, you see a really beautiful waterfall, so I guess in my experience, the good stuff I saw far outweighed the bad in terms of visuals, but there is some stuff that doesn't look quite that good. I think the character models are a bit of a highlight, and I did go back and look at some of the old Ryza footage that I had to compare the two, and there does seem to be some improvements, albeit they're only slight ones. Story-wise, Sophie 2 hasn't really grabbed me in the same way that the original did, but that's not to say that it's bad or anything like that. I'm not exactly sure why, if I'm honest, it just hasn't hooked me in the same way, although having said that, I did find that it got much more interesting the further I got in, so that is something. And again, it's not that I thought the story in the first game was perfect and that this one was awful or anything even close to that. I like both of them a lot, but this one just didn't hook me right away. It took a little bit of time. Perhaps it's because we already know Sophie and what she's all about. I really don't know what it is, but there is one thing I do know and one thing that I can answer. A lot of people will probably wonder if you can just jump straight into this game without having played the original Atelier Sophie. And after playing through the game, I would say that yes, you can jump into this game, but playing the original would be a good idea if possible, as it's frankly just a great game in its own right. I don't think it's absolutely 100% necessary though, and the reason I say that is because Atelier Sophie 2 has a story so far section on the main menu, which is actually quite a lengthy retelling of the entire first game, so you can get caught up there. I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get an English dub for the game, but it's not the end of the world. I know they used to get them in the Atelier series, but I'm not sure exactly when it stopped. I'm pretty sure the original Sophie game had an English dub, so it is a bit jarring not to have one here, and now that I think about it, perhaps that's actually the main reason I didn't connect with the story as much this time round. Sophie doesn't kinda sound like Sophie to me with a different voice, so it's not really hitting me in the same way, I guess. And I know most people prefer the original Japanese voices anyway, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have the option. Another factor is that it is quite expensive to do, but I can't imagine it would hurt the game's profitability that much, to the point where they just wouldn't do it. I mean, maybe it would, I don't know, I'm not an expert. It may be a selfish thing to say, but I'd love to see English dubs as a standard practice when localizing any game. I don't think giving players the option of different voices could ever be a bad thing. In regards to the gameplay, I actually had a lot of fun just collecting ingredients, crafting new items, and fighting random battles. The combat was fun, the skills look really cool to use, and the character designs are all pretty great. Especially this one, although I can't really think of why. In general though, the game has a very chilled out feeling to it, and besides a few sections in the story, it feels like you can just take things at your own pace and get things done when you want to do them. In fact, that's probably the reason I never got to the end of the first Sophie game, because I was just too chilled out and spent way too much time on stuff I didn't need to do anymore. Still though, it's a very laid back experience, and for me it's one of those games that just feels best with the lights dimmed down and a hot cup of tea. And to be honest, the Atelier games have never failed to put me in a warm and happy mood, and I just enjoy existing in them, and this game was no exception. In my opinion, Atelier Sophie 2 is a worthy sequel to the original, and in my experience has no real negatives to speak of. The series has always been quite niche, and niche it shall remain, but that doesn't mean it isn't an enjoyable and worthwhile experience. If you're a fan of this series, you need no convincing, but if you're on the fence and not sure whether you want to try it, I would personally recommend that you give it a go. The game does feature the story so far section, so even if you missed the first game, you can use that to catch up and learn what happened. Ultimately, I think it's a solid JRPG with fun combat, nice visuals, and a surprisingly interesting alchemy system. At the end of the day, I can't tell you if you're going to like it, but what I can tell you is that I really enjoyed it, and in my view, for what you get, it is absolutely worth its asking price. If you enjoyed the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do here and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.